Welcome to Wagon Wheel. I am Jarrod Kimber, and we had a lot of really, really interesting questions lined up, and then the whole thing kind of went to hell, didn't it? So let's play the bumper, and we'll try and work out what we're going to do from there. Well, thank you for everyone for coming across. As I said, there was, we'll still get to some of the questions, I'm sure, from Twitter, but I'll probably be taking more from YouTube today, being that we didn't really know what was going to be going on until this morning. We will... I'll go through some of the questions and everything. And have a look. But yeah, if you do have any questions, drop them into the YouTube chat. What's it called? I don't know what this one's called. Live chat, is it? I suppose. And we can certainly talk about that. I'll just have a look if there's anything in there to start with. But why did the franchises hide positive cases till today? I don't think we need to necessarily go all in on that side of things. You've got to remember that from a very basic point of view, there is a duty of care to the athletes. We've seen in other leagues that players have just never wanted the fact that they've had COVID to come out publicly. There's also, as we have seen time and time again, false positives. Anyone who's been involved in this has probably had one of those quick action tests come back with a positive over time. So I think that which would turn out not to be true. So I'm not blaming any teams for anything. I think if you're going to be realistic about this, it's probably that they waited for the bubble to actually break before cancelling the tournament, whereas it was quite clear that this tournament shouldn't have gone on. Well, probably from the beginning, but certainly over the last couple of weeks, everything that is going on in India is ridiculous. And I know people have said things like, oh, the Premier League continued and the American sports did. None of them were in a situation like this. And I don't think they should have continued. I don't think England should have been playing Test cricket last year in England in the middle of their pandemic. When it comes down to it, I don't want to get too much into the details of when and where. And I haven't looked into all those things either. But it's certainly a situation where, what's the best way of putting it? There's going to be a lot to be discussed over the next couple of weeks, but with the IPL were obviously a bit too late in cancelling this tournament, but at least they have, and that's a huge one. I don't know how many of you, were following the NFL, but my favorite pandemic story when it comes to sport and just how silly we all are is that the Denver Broncos had to go into a game in the NFL without a quarterback because all four of their quarterback were out due to COVID, either having it or being around it. I don't know how much you know about American football, but the quarterback is quite an important position. And I believe it was someone who hadn't played quarterback since high school who had to take over. That's the sort of situation the IPL would have gone into, really, wouldn't it? You would have had, instead of Moses Enriquez and Marcus Stoinis opening the bowling for tactics, they would have been like your two main seamers. We would have had backup wicket keepers coming in who hadn't wicket kept since they were 14, and all those sort of part-timers having to bowl spin for the first time in a decade, and all that sort of stuff probably would have had to happen. And so from a sporting perspective, it had to go. But from a non-sporting perspective, it was very, very clear that it shouldn't have been run in the first place. I've been very vocal on the fact that these events don't need to be run. I've got no problem with the people down the chain still getting paid for them. The money is still going to be coming in. In this case, everyone will be paid because the league is just being suspended. But what we don't really want is a situation where we're taking resources away from people who really need resources. We don't want a situation where we are actively spreading the virus, which is potentially has happened here. And I think those have been my two biggest problems with sport during the pandemic all the way through, really, is that combination of taking resources away from people who need them and spreading the virus. And this was always, possible outcome. I don't think anyone didn't think this was possible. So here we are. Let's have a look at some questions. Akash V says, Jarrod, do you think that T20 World Cup will be moved out of India? Yeah, I don't think it was going to get played there regardless of the IPL. I think that, they'd already, if you had a look, there was already what I'll call them soft leaks. There was already a couple of soft leaks coming in, basically suggesting they were going to go to the UAE. I think it makes a lot more sense there. All those different teams flying around the world into India in what is it, 4 or 5 months, 6 months away? It just doesn't look likely, does it? In the same way that, Japan in the Olympics has never looked likely, despite the fact that Japan are doing everything they can to try and do it. I think there are just some places that just haven't got on top of the pandemic. And if that's the case, you can't have a big event like that. And you shouldn't have a big event like that. There are plenty of other places they can play the World T20. If it's going to be UAE, it's going to be UAE. I think we have to be realistic as well. There's a big difference between a domestic league with a few international players in it and an international competition. You are talking about, let's say, if you talk about a team like Scotland and some of the other associates, you're looking at between 20 and 25 people. Some of the bigger teams, you're looking at between 30 and 35 people. That's not including broadcasters. That's not including all the ICC staff. You're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, maybe 1,000 people, all in all, moving around, coming to India for that tournament. I don't think it was ever particularly likely. I think it was quite optimistic from a long way out. The domestic league is just a little bit different, isn't it? But even that hasn't worked. Really, I think if you look at the way they've done this domestic league, they would have been much better off trying to do a single bubble in a single city or two. So I've heard people suggest, Mumbai and Pune. If you look at what I thought the NBA did the best bubble when it comes to professional sports, when they basically moved the whole thing to Disney. I think that is your best option. I think you can marginally do that a little bit better in the UAE. You'd have a base camp in Abu Dhabi and one in Dubai, and split them between those. You've also got the other smaller grounds, which is not ideal, but if you're not going to have crowds, I don't think it matters that much if you use some of the other grounds around, and they're good quality pitches as well. So it's not like they're unprofessional in any nature. In fact, if they're good enough for the qualifying event for the World Cup, you would hope they're good enough for the World Cup as well. So it'd be really interesting to see what happens with that tournament. But yeah, I don't think it needs to be in India. I don't think it helps India. I think you still say India host it, and they can certainly still have a flavor of it. But realistically, I think at this stage, it needs to be moved somewhere else, just for it to go ahead. But, if it was me, I'm not sure that I'd be massively pushing for a global sporting event in October at the moment. But obviously the ICC is desperate for it to go ahead, as we saw with most cricket boards, desperate for their events to go ahead. I'll just have a look at a couple more questions here. Chinmay says, all Indians, what are they going to do from 7:30 p.m.? Well, I've got a lot of content on the channel, my man. In fact, I have so much content on the channel. Let's just have a quick look at what I have done in the last week while I recalibrate and work out what I'm going to be doing going forward. Remember, the power list is not a points table. You can find that on Google, I am reliably told. I'm looking at more than just wins and losses. Apparently today I'm looking at appendices as well. Appendix? Appendixes? Is appendix? Appendi? Appendixes? Chennai. Still number one, I see. Delhi Capitals. Item 4, special edition of Bowl First, as David Warner has been relieved, sacked, demoted as the captain of the Sunrisers, which is big news, especially for those who'd laid all their bets on Owen Morgan being the first overseas captain to lose his job this year. So it was quite a surprise, I think, all things considered. So it seems to me that Chennai, Delhi and RCB are just a cut above. Now, they might all struggle for the second part of the season. That's more than fine. But they also almost... But it was one of those early things that still really gets to me now. The big dip after the power play. Oh yeah, that big dip. And I obviously understand the maths here. There is a 150% rise in humans on the boundary. straight away that should change how teams bat. I'll ask you a question, but it's a loaded question because you've given me the answer once. Would you agree that batting at 4 in T20 cricket is the worst possible place to bat?
Well, we've discussed this, and there's no doubt that it is. Yeah, it's not loaded. It's probably fact, actually. So I think if you went and asked every number 4 batter across all forms of cricket,
Ashwin is clearly not like this. He's had 4 out of this world seasons and 6 ordinary or far, far worse. But for everything I've said, Ashwin has a simply ridiculous record in the power play. I would certainly take Bhuvi before him, but I'd also like to use him there if he can take wickets like this. But all of this brings us back to Mohammad Shami. It's funny, the dots going across to his mouth, and then it's me. So we had a good week. We've actually got a lot of content still lined up, and obviously the kind of content that I do is not as dependent on the tournament itself. So there will be plenty of videos coming up that we have. We've got a couple of really interesting ones. One on I sort of took a historical look at old T20, old cricketers and how they would fit into T20. But rather than doing the very obvious Victor Trump, Viv Richards, I've gone for a more random selection of cricketers. But I think you will like it, especially if you're a big T20 head. I think it will come across quite well. I've got another one on why players don't run on the last ball of the first innings of white ball cricket. And yeah, just a bunch of other things. Abhinav Mukund obviously was on my podcast, and so we'll be putting the video up of that within the next couple of days as well. So there's literally plenty of stuff to come. I'll just have a look at some of these questions. Where are we? Subamay says, "Are you returning to ESPNcricinfo?" Well, that's very person. Am I returning? I can't go anywhere at the moment. I've signed back up with Cricinfo for a little while. For the next, I don't know, until the end of the Ashes, I think I'm with them. Just doing a little bit more writing over there. Obviously, now that COVID is finished, they probably have a budget again. So they've tapped me back on the shoulder. We'll still be writing for other places as well. Plus, I'll be doing my emailer. Don't know how many of you have done that, but I do a lot of analytical writing over on my emailer and looking at trends and things as well. Some things that don't end up on the videos, some things that do end up on the videos, but need to be written out a little bit differently and everything. So I'll still be writing over there. But yeah, I'll be popping into Cricinfo. Why not? So I wrote my first piece on Mustafizur Rahman, which I will be turning into a video. It'll be slightly different than the written feature. But I was really interested I've been interested in him for a very, very long time. So if you want to head over to Cricinfo and pop my name and his name in, I'm sure you'll be able to find that piece. Let me just have a look. Who has been the most valuable player of this IPL? Very, very interesting. So that comes from Quality Caps. I thought he had a picture of Duckman in his profile. Then I got very excited, but it's just Daffy Duck, a golden duck type thing. Duckman is one of the greatest adult cartoons of all time. But it's a very interesting one. You'd have to go back and have a very good look at the numbers. Be interested to see where Ravi Jadeja comes in. I mean, his 24 off 24 was not ideal. AB de Villiers, obviously, those innings that he played were just kind of next level, weren't they? Certainly allowed them to win games and crush games that they may not have been in. So he certainly had a big effect on their team. I suppose Prithvi Shaw would be really interesting too, to have a look at the effect that he had on those teams. It might be one for the CricViz metrics, in fact, because they'd be looking at the biggest impact. But we're 7.5 games in? Yes, we are 7.5 games in. We're actually like 7 1/5 games in, aren't we? Maybe 7 1/4. I'd have to look at the exact maths, but two teams have played 8 games, and the other guys have played 6, I think, off the top of my head. So very, very early on in this season. You can easily have someone like Nicholas Puran has proved. You could easily have a bunch of games where nothing goes right for you, and you could easily have a bunch of games where everything goes right for you. It's a halfway through the season, plus not including the playoffs. So long way to go there. Lokesh says, how just two players, Moeen Ali and Suresh Raina, completely changed CSK. I think, Lokesh, if you look at this, there's been a big change in the way that they have thought about their cricket as well. I think they were going towards this. I think what Moeen Ali allows them to do is to have a player who play a lot of their players, and this is a Chennai trait, as we've seen over the years. A lot of their players like to play within themselves a little bit. They like to consolidate, make sure that they're not going to collapse, get a decent score on the board and go. So we're talking about their batters, obviously, here. What Moeen Ali allows is a very attacking batsman who's still going to average 20 to 25, you would think, over the course of a season, but probably do it at a high strike rate with a sense of abandon. So I think he gives them an impetus they probably haven't had for a very long time in that top order. He also gives them another potential 4 overs, but he's probably going to average 2.5, maybe 3 overs a game. I would think at best, maybe 2 overs at worst and 3 overs at best. And that gives them a huge flexibility with matchups. It allows them not to play Imran Tahir unless they really, feel the need to play Imran Tahir. I think that Moeen Ali on his own completely changes that. And then, of course, you are chucking into the middle of that the ability of Suresh Raina, who is a quality player in that middle order. He'd have to go down as one of the greatest players in IPL history. He's probably very underrated just because he hasn't had as much success for India as he should have. It's 2 pretty handy players to come. So when you say just 2 players, in cricket, that can be a big, big effect. And I think in this case, that's what we've seen. Let's have a look. What else? Anne says, why don't spinners bowl much in the 19th or 20th over? Sunrisers used Rashid and even DC used spinner to bowl the super over. Is that wise? Basically, I think there is a feeling within T20 cricket that spinners, while having the ability to have the lowest economy, can also have the highest in a particular over. If you line up a spinner and there's not much you can do about them, there's not much they can do to get out of that over. Whereas seamers have just more options. That the bouncer is an option. The very fast wide Yorker is an option. Once a spinner gets into an over, there's not much they can do. They can go for the wide Yorkers, for instance. But generally spinners aren't as good as hitting Yorkers as seam bowlers, just because it's a different kind of skill. They can't really bowl bouncers. They can't really change their lengths massively. They can kind of go full or a good length for a spinner. If they go short or if they go too full, they're in trouble. So I think that generally that's what it's seen as something that is options. When you're talking about that super over, generally super overs are a little bit more matchup dependent. You kind of know who's going to be sent out. In Rashid Khan's case, he is the best death bowler in T20 cricket. Now, Jasprit Bumrah does it a lot more. There's a lot of other very good death bowlers around the world, but when it comes down to it, Rashid Khan is a good death bowler because he can spin the ball both ways. The reason he's not used in the death is they're trying to get wickets out of him really in the middle, or now they're moving him up the order. So I think that is certainly something that is coming about and been happening a lot more of recent times. But that game that you're talking about, oh wait, am I thinking of the right game? Yeah, Sunrisers Delhi, wasn't it? That particular game, the pitch was ragging. That's the time you do use your spinners at the death. I think we've seen Sunil Narayan, Rashid Khan, Adil Rashid used to have a very good record at the death. He doesn't bowl it very much. I'm trying to think if there are many other guys. Adam Zampa's not a bad death bowler. Maybe not so much in the IPL, but in some of the other leagues that he's played in. I always thought Michael Beer from Australia should have probably been used more at the death. So there are certainly spinners. I think we will see going forward, there'll be more spinners there. I think what you need, the problem is at the moment, is if you don't have a death spin bowler, you actually allow the other team to just load up with guys at 6, 7, and 8 who can only hit pace. So someone like Darren Sammy, I don't know if this is still the case, but over a 3 or a 5 year period, he had a run rate against spinners of less than 100. He could not strike the spinners at all, and when he did, he went out. He didn't stay in long to them either. And yet Darren Sammy is one of the world's best hitters of pace. And I remember when I was with Melbourne Stars, we lost that final against the Renegades, basically because we used our spinners too early, which allowed Tom Cooper and Dan Christian to wait, just knock our spinners around, and then score whatever they scored, 50 or so off the last 4 overs, and give them a good enough total that they ended up being able to defend it. So I think that what we might see going into the future is specialist death spinners. But I think we're a long way away from that at the moment. I think captains and teams are just very nervous about that. But yeah, it's a really good question. I know that there are a lot of spin bowling coaches around the world who think spinners are underused at the death. I don't think that's the case at the moment. But if you think back to we had and I've now forgotten his name, but the New Zealand opening bowler in the 1992 World Cup, using spin. It took a long time after that for us to have spinners as a regular sort of opening bowler. And even in T20 cricket, we would have the sort of first over bowled by a part-timer sometimes. But we didn't have many players like Michael Beer or Samuel Badgery or Washington Sundar, those sorts of players who are sort of specialist spin opening bowlers, power play bowlers. And even now, there's not a massive amount of them. So I think that there will be a natural sort of transition towards death spin bowlers as well. But at the moment, kind of makes sense to use the best guys in the world to be able to do that. Rashid Khan and Sunil Narayan when he was at his best and those sorts of players, rather than just throwing in anyone. So I think that's the reason anyway. Let's just have a look at what else we have here. There's a lot of questions about if the IPL was to be decided at this point, who would be the winner? The current table topper or the top winner? All teams have played 7 matches, or RCB. That is Vadaraj Kamath saying that. You can't have a winner of an IPL after 7 games. I don't think it's too random a format. Realistically, to be able to do that, we haven't seen teams in knockout situations. At least, the World Cup would give you that sort of thing. But I thought Chennai was the best team going into the darkness, as it were. I know Delhi had more wins, and Chennai might have lost the next game, and Delhi might have stayed one game up on them. But I thought Chennai were the best team overall. It took an incredible effort by Karan Pollard to defeat them the other night. And I just think they're rolling the best. But yeah, obviously we will not be giving any of those. We will not be giving any of those results. Although I have suggested that my power rankings should be the official IPL. If it is closed off, we'll go with that. And that was Chennai. So there you go. Sarab says, will we see you, Mel, and George Dobell host polite inquiries? Well, Mel doesn't work for Cricinfo anymore. And as far as I'm aware, unless she's about to send me a message because she's watching this, I don't think she's signed back up with them. She's now working for another organization. Sorry, Mel, I've forgotten the name of it. Sports something, isn't it? But she's working for them. I'm going back with Cricinfo. So, there's every chance that me and George could be back on polite inquiries during the summer. I don't think I'm signed up for like every day of the England summer, but I'll certainly be around for little bits of it, unless it's also suspended for similar reasons. And so, I probably will be heading back to polite inquiries once or twice for fun. Let me just have a look if there's anyone else. What about the rise of Harshal Patel and Avesh Khan? Harshal Patel is really, really interesting, I think. He's now going at over 9 runs and over. And that is kind of what you would expect someone who bowls at his pace, right arm seam, without an absolute incredible slow ball, though I think his slow ball is quite good. He took one, I think when he took his 5-wicket haul, there was a reverse. I don't think he's got many balls to do anything other than a little fade since then. And his numbers have gone up. The big concern with him from the start was whether it was a Chennai-based thing. I think he's a slightly better bowler than we thought, but teams are now certainly cashing in on him a little bit at the death. Avesh Khan, I really like. It feels like to me, Sakaria, Harshal Patel, Arshdeep Singh, and Avesh Khan, they all had success early in the tournament, didn't they? And I think that I think I've been pretty clear, if you look at the videos, that Avesh Khan was the one I thought was going to last. I thought what he did was very repeatable, and he should be around for a long time. Harshal Patel, I still like the fact he's taken a lot of wickets, but I'm not sure. Arshdeep Singh is always going to be a high economy, high runs guy, I would think. High economy, high wicket taking guy. So I think you go for a lot of. I think he can continually take wickets, but I think there's going to be a lot of high economy there. Sakari is the one who confuses me the most, and I really want to see a lot more of him. He's obviously a talented player. He's got a lot of skills, but he's certainly not the complete package just yet. Very, very young. Also, just I would like to see him on a team that had more right arm seam. Just because then he would be more of a difference maker. At the moment, they're being able, he's going up against with a bunch of other left arm seamers. I'm wondering if they're just being able to line them up a little bit better. In the exact same way that too many right arm seam that can happen with. Samitra says, Jarrod, thanks for your informative takes and can't wait for your videos on the World Test Championship. Yeah, I've got some good things actually. The producers are going to be so upset at this, but I've got this incredible series. I want to say series because there's no way we can do it in one video on New Zealand cricket, which is by far the craziest. If you think the Ben Dunk video was random or the Neil Wagner video was random, wait until you see what I've got lined up for New Zealand. I've got about 3 or 4 really good ideas for them because they're obviously slightly more interesting team, but there's probably a couple of good videos for India within me as well that we'll be looking at. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. As someone who covers all the test teams, I really like I wish it was a proper league and I wish it was a bit blah, 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 blah. But I really like that this is happening, and as a one-off event, if nothing else, can't wait to be involved. I don't know if I'll get press accreditation for that one, although it's not too far from my house, so I'd like to be able to go. But whether I'm doing it from home or whether I'm doing it from the ground, I'm really looking forward to the World Test Championship. So, there's a lot of really cool stuff planned. So I can probably work on some of the more longer form stuff. Obviously, during the IPL, everything. We've done a few videos. Things like the power play bowlers and the big dip and a few other things. But it'd be really good to get my teeth back into some of the longer format stuff, which is kind of the main part of this channel. But what we really want is when I'm covering a tournament, it's ridiculous for me not to make a video every day. So that's why we did it for the IPL. We would have done it for the some of the Indian series as well, but we're still trying to come to grips with getting people on my channel because obviously we need producers and everything at that stage. So hopefully throughout the summer for the series that I'll be covering. So I'll be covering the World Test Championship. I'll be covering New Zealand, England. I'll be covering India, England. I'll be covering the World Cup some way or another. So for all those things, there'll be more daily content, but around them, we'll try and do this more long form stuff. So there's a lot of stuff to come. I just want to go across to some of the questions on from Twitter. I'm going to go to question 5 on Twitter to throw my producer completely out. Look how quick he is. Well done, Moku. Thoughts on blessing Muzur Mbani. Well, I can't say it, apparently. Apparently, that's the first time I've ever had to say it out loud. That's the problem with cricket names. I spend all my time reading them and looking at scorecards and watching them, and I never pay any attention to how the commentators ever pronounce them, which was fine until I had a YouTube channel. Look, he's an incredible talent. I remember seeing him play in county cricket, and for those of you who haven't seen him, he is the young Zimbabwean. He signed a big deal in county cricket. I think it was a 3-year deal, but he's back with Zimbabwe cricket. I think he's 6'10", 6'11". There's a lot of Jason Holder about him. He's a slightly different kind of bowler than Jason Holder. There's a bit more energy on his deliveries. I don't think he's particularly that much faster than Jason Holder, but Jason Holder always feels like to me he's in complete control. I don't think Blessing's quite the same way. But I really do like him. I think he's got a lot of energy. His first class record so far is phenomenal. It sort of shows you that I remember with the West Indies, everyone saying that the West Indies were struggling and that they didn't like cricket anymore and they weren't, finding talented players. And then while that was happening, they were completely taking over T20 cricket. And I think Zimbabwe is a similar situation. When you have a bad governance and when your cricket is not professionally run around you, the actual level of talent doesn't go away. It doesn't drop off. It's just that it's not harnessed and it's not trained and it's not coached. And I think with someone like Blessing, and there's someone like Ryan Burl in Zimbabwe as well, who I think just in a stronger cricket environment would be a really, really interesting cricketer. And I think Zimbabwe have a lot of guys like that out there at the moment. And hopefully if they get to play a little bit more cricket together and develop together as a unit and then go off and play, I don't know if Blessing's particularly a T20 player, but there's no reason why he couldn't get some county deals, for instance. But he might end up being a T20 player as well. For someone who's 6'10", he seems to have a fairly decent slow ball on occasion. And you have a look around at someone, like I said, someone like Ryan Burl. There's a few, Raza was obviously another, a really talented player as well who did play some franchise cricket. If those guys can get a little bit of franchise cricket, even at the lower levels, even at some of the smaller leagues, and then come back to Zimbabwe, I just think that is huge for Zimbabwe cricket. And I think it's great that that he is coming around. I'll just take another one off the. I'll just have a look at some of the other questions on the YouTube. Do you think average inning strike rate is the most important? Average inning strike rate is the most important statistic in T20 batting. No, I mean, the most important statistic in T20 batting would probably have to take in when you come into the, put it this way. If you come in for the fourth over of a T20 game, and you're coming in at 1 for 20, and we know what that ground does and what the scoring rate of that ground is, and we know what a player usually coming in T20 cricket at 1 for 20 will go on to score. So let's say they score on average 20 off 18 balls. What are you adding to that? How fast have you scored? How many how many resources have you done? When have you gone out? And those sorts of things. That is the best way to be able to work out the impact of a batsman over the long term. I know ESPN had something with the batter at the other end. I'm not as interested in the batter at the other end, but I want to know the conditions. I want to know the league. I want to know, the score. So, if you're a T20 batter and you're coming in and the score is, I don't know, 5 for 30, or 30 for 5, sorry, went all Australian on you there. Are you, in that particular situation, are you, what is the average score of that player and what are you putting in? And we can do a similar sort of thing with bowling as well. So I think that's the best way of working out the impact of players. Average and strike rate will always be there. There will be different metrics and different ways that we use them. But yeah, I think we're well beyond that. We have the map of T20 games so much now. We know we have so much information about them that it sort of seems a little bit ridiculous, I think, at a certain point to hold on to the older sorts of metrics. It's something I talk about in the run out, running on the last ball, that innings video that we're making at the moment is if you're run out off the first ball of the innings, that is an absolute colossal mistake. And you should not be doing that. If you're run out off the last ball of the innings, it doesn't matter. It just does not matter at all. It should not affect how anyone ever sees you as a T20 player at all. And I think that until we can get to that point where batters are thinking about things that way, and averages are never going to particularly work for that, I think. And I think that's what we have to do in T20. And to be fair, I think if you look at the Dawid Malan situation, you can already see that England didn't care about his average. In fact, they were upset that he didn't run off the last ball of a game when he made 100 for England. They dropped him for Joe Denley, despite the fact he already had a high average for England, because they're looking at many, many different metrics. And they were looking at his overall T20 record as well. They were also probably looking at the flexibility that Joe Denley gave them, although they both ball leg spin. I think Joe Denley's leg spin was seen as better at that point. And so, realistically, I think that is where we are. I think that is where we're going with T20. We will just continue to move until it doesn't matter. The problem is that, average is such a legacy stat. Also, average is a really good stat for first-class cricket. It's not brilliant. We can certainly do better. And there will be better options, I think, available going forward. And there already are. But average is actually over 20 first-class games. Average is a decent way of working out if someone is pretty good. There are huge other caveats to that, of course, because you play home and away, and you could get caught up against one good bowling attack and run-outs factor in and all those sorts of things. But as a general rule, average does tell you something. So I think it's going to be hard for a certain section of the cricket media, cricketers and the cricket public to sort of completely distance themselves from average. But clearly for T20 cricket, it is less and less important as we go on. It tells us this is the thing. I remember talking to Nathan Lehman about this a couple of years ago. There's an interview I did with him on Cricinfo, and him and I are very, very adamant on one single point that we both agree on, which is there's no magic number in cricket. So that one thing that I realized quite early on was I wasn't looking for a magic number to tell you if a player was good or bad. There's a few different things we can use. Runs above average is quite good, and there's some of the others that Amol Desai has got involved with, and those sorts of things. But essentially, when you look at this as a total package, it's just like that's why I look at all the individual little things. So first 5 strike rate can be very important. Balls per boundary can be very important. Where the player comes in, when they come in, all these sorts of things. I don't think that one magic number is. I don't think it's a very good way of looking at analytics. So I probably try and move beyond that. Anyway, you asked a very normal question, and I went very very crazy on that one. But that is what I do. Let's actually just go back to Twitter for a minute. Vanilla Waller, question number 6 on Twitter says, how do you judge a player like Pooran who's failed by conventional standards this season? Yeah, I mean, Clive is obviously a analyst as well. I'm not too worried about a player failing in 6 or 7 games as a general rule. I know there was a run out in there as well, so I'm even less worried about that because I know that players fail over those periods. That's a very normal thing for a middle order T20 player to have happen to them, especially in Pooran's case, because he is so much more attacking than a normal number 4 or number 5. So for me, I'm not even particularly worried about those sorts of things. In his case, if I was working with the team, it would be completely different. Suppose if I was working with the team, I would be paying attention to him in the nets, and I'd probably be chatting to him to see where his mind is and where he is thinking about things. You'd be working with, if you were the analyst for the Kings, you'd be, trying to work on a plan to get him back, looking for any patterns in his dismissals. With him, it's obviously I think there's been 3 short ball dismissals, but remember one of those was a junk ball down the leg side. One was a brute from Kyle Jamieson, which could be a weakness. And the other one was a hook shot, was a first or second ball. I'm less worried about that, but I think that'd be something that you'd probably be going to him and his coaches with and just going, is this something you think we need to work on or not? And then I haven't looked at his full history to see how often he gets out to the short ball, but it would be interesting to go back. I mean, he's a short batter that comes from the West Indies. Kind of think that he shouldn't have a problem with the short ball. It's usually the taller guys or the guys that aren't used to getting bounced a lot when they're young that usually have more of a problem with it. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have a problem with it. So that's what I would be doing with him. But I wouldn't be that worried. I think that what we need to do as fundamentally is we have got to a place in cricket, and we've kind of always been there, where we are so fascinated with being dropped and not being dropped. Like, there's absolutely no problem, I think, going to Pooran and going, look, it's not working for you at the moment. Let's spend a week with you in the nets, right? Forget being dropped, forget being in the team, forget all that pressure. Let's spend a week in the nets, see how you come out of the nets, right? And I think that because in cricket, the first 11 is this huge thing that we always have to be like fascinated with, and everyone has to be in it. We haven't really thought about the bigger picture, which is that players should be able to come and go. And I think in Pooran's case, that would be the absolute best case scenario at the moment. So I think that I'm not sitting there saying to myself, oh no. Sorry if I just zoomed in there, but I was trying to fix the light. I'm not actually, particularly that worried about what has happened, but I can understand what other people would be. And what I did that video on KL Rahul. If you want to know about form, go back and have a look at that because I think that explains how I think about form as a general rule. Ramesh Sashi says, is there a massive cricket open source data set like the EPL or NFL? No, Crick Sheets is your best option. Anyone out there who wants to find out all the ball by ball data, certainly Crick Sheets is the best place to go. Go and check that one out. There's masses of information there. I think, obviously you need to be a little bit good at coding and all those sorts of things, but it's worth having a go. So I can have a bit of a break and just drink this water. We're going to play the Supercut again now. And I will now fill for a second while my producer finds the Supercut. I will stop. Remember, the power list is not a points table. You can find that on Google, I am reliably told. I'm looking at more than just wins and losses. Apparently today I'm looking at appendices as well. Appendix? Appendixes? Is appendix? Appendi? Appendixes? Chennai. Still number one, I see. Delhi Capitals. Item 4, full edition of Bowl First, as David Warner has been relieved, sacked, demoted as the captain of the Sunrisers, which is big news, especially for those who'd laid all their bets on Owen Morgan being the first overseas captain to lose his job this year. So it was quite a surprise, I think, all things considered. So it seems to me that Chennai, Delhi and RCB are just a cut above. Now, they might all struggle for the second part of the season. That's more than fine. But they also almost... But it was one of those early things that still really gets to me now. The big dip after the power play. Oh yeah, that big dip. And I obviously understand the maths here. There is a 150% rise in humans on the boundary. Straight away, that should change how teams bat. I'll ask you a question, but it's a loaded question because you've given me the answer once. Would you agree that batting at 4 in T20 cricket is the worst possible place to bat?
Well, we've discussed this, and there's no doubt that it is. Yeah. It's not loaded. It's probably fact, actually. So I think if you went and asked every number 4 batter across all forms of cricket...
Ashwin is clearly not like this. He's had 4 out-of-this-world seasons and 6 ordinary or far, far worse. But for everything I've said, Ashwin has a simply ridiculous record in the power play. I would certainly take Bhuvi before him, but I'd also like to use him there if he can take wickets like this. But all of this brings us back to Mohammad Shami. Yeah, I did use that photo of Mohammad Shami because his mouth is open and the ball and the dots are going to be going into it. So if that's what you were thinking, that's great. Vadaraj Kamath says, how did Shardul Thakur's form fall off a cliff after the England season? I think you need to understand that he is going to be one of those bowlers. Like he's not I don't think he's anyone's idea of a perfect limited overs bowler. He's basically a cutter bowler with average control. And he was going for runs even in the England series, and they were attacking him. And he had some really good matchups in that as well. But I don't think anyone thought coming in that he's a lock bowler. His form is going to fluctuate a little bit. I think he's the sort of guy that can get you. He at times in one-day cricket, he's probably going to go at 8 and over, and at other times he's going to take 3 for 40 and completely rip out a middle order. I just think he is that kind of player as a general cricketer. So I think that's why that has been the case. Quality Caps says, why has AB de Villa stopped his improvisation strokes? I think you have a look. A lot of players are, and I think that someone tried to scoop Kieron Pollard in one of these games, and the ball went nowhere. I think that's right. I think that might have been one of Kieron Pollard's wickets, or certainly an almost wicket. Anyway, I think that now there are so many slow balls, and I don't think anyone counts them correctly. CricViz is probably the closest to counting them. But I think there are so many slow balls now that batters are not feeling as confident about ramping and doing all those other shots. So it's not that AB is not doing it as much. I think if you look right across the game, players aren't doing them as much. Now that will change. That will go in different fads, and bowlers are trying to bowl more Yorkers at the moment. That will end up with more half volleys and full tosses that get hit for 6, which means and more scoops. But I think that right at the moment, with the amount of slow balls that have been bowling, I don't think those sort of premeditated shots are as good. There's also a situation recently. and I forget the bowler and the batter, sadly, where someone got ready for a scoop, and you could see the bowler was going to bowl seam up, or cross seam, actually, I think it was. And they basically, at the last minute, just bowled a sort of let's call it almost like a half cutter. So they just sort of did this with their hand. And I don't think they were going to bowl that delivery. So I think now that when batters are doing that, my guess is, and I haven't talked to enough bowlers, but my guess is now that when bowlers see a batter get down for a scoop or a lap or whatever they're going to do, they're going to bowl slower and slower, which makes it harder. It brings in third man, short third man and short fine leg as proper catching options. Whereas before, you didn't really need to get that much bat to get it over the top. So I think there's just a few different problems that are brought out by that. But yeah, no, it's a really good question. But I do think it's probably a little bit more wide right across the game. Let me just have this was a good one from Twitter. Question number 2 on Twitter was, if there were no retentions and every IPL team starts from scratch, who would you spend the most money on? Who would I spend the most money on? I would probably spend the most money on Hardik Pandya. I think. Yeah, I'm going to go Hardik Pandya. I would then probably have my second most money on Bumrah. And then I would probably be thinking right at the moment, somewhere between Jadeja and Bhuvi Kumar, I think would be my third options. Wouldn't spend any of my money on international players. I can top up with good international. As good as Rashid Khan is, and don't get me wrong, he's next level. I kind of feel like I can still get an incredible one. What I really want to do is create an absolute killer core of Indian players, and then build up my overseas players around that. There's always going to be another good overseas player coming through. Do you know what I mean? And they move around. Chris Morris just moved teams. Those options are always available to you. But I think that if you can get a core of 3 to 5 just next level Indian talent, that is the way that you should start. That is the way that I would be doing it if I was working in the IPL. Certainly what I was trying to do when I was in the CPL. So yeah, but good question. Who is that? Ankit. Good question there. Where are we? Now, I was just about to ask this question about Zach Crawley, and my producer has done it. So are we now so mind melded, myself and my producer, that he now knows what I'm going to pick? But yeah, Dex, what are your thoughts on Zach Crawley? How will he perform in the Ashes later this year? I think he has a very limited game, and there's a lot to develop. He's not a regular run scorer yet at first class level. And I think with that, we will see a fluctuation of results from him. I think that I would not be getting too excited and thinking that in the next 3 years, he's going to be averaging 45 in Test match cricket. If he averaged 40 in Test match cricket, that would be an absolute win for England, considering everything. And so I think that you have to be patient with him. And there is going to be, I think they're going to be an entire series where he doesn't make many runs. And I think they're going to be entire series where it looks like you can't get him out. But I'm worried about him in the short ball, which could be a problem in Australia. I'm worried about him, against certain kinds of spin, which will be a problem for him, in and around Asia, as we've already seen. And also just the very basic thing of, I think you get a little, I talked about this. I wrote a piece for the Cricketer when he was picked. I think it went up on the Cricketer about the Matt Renshaw thing. Matt Renshaw came in for Australia, very young, very naive, hadn't made a lot of first-class runs, although I think he had a better record than Zach Crawley. And he starts making runs straight away. And everyone's like, oh, look. You have to understand that if there's no history on a player, and a player is naturally gifted in a certain way, they can make runs. It didn't take that long to work out that Matt Renshaw cannot score on the offside. And once that is the case, he becomes very vulnerable to that. And that's not to say that Matt Renshaw is a failure and he won't be any good in 5 years' time. If you look at the great Australian teams, Langer came in very early, made a couple of runs, then disappeared. Hayden came in very early. Martin came in very early. A lot of these guys did. The people who stick around are usually, Ricky Ponting type players, Joe Root type players. And I think with Zach Crawley, we might just have to be a bit realistic. His game is not as rounded as some of those other players. Ollie Pope is already starting to struggle a little bit, and it wasn't that long ago he was the second coming. So I think Zach Crawley's got a lot of upside, but I'd more be looking towards Zach Crawley in his mid to late 20s, being a really quality player. I wouldn't be putting. We talked about it before. The tyranny of the first 11, if you will. He comes in, he plays good, great. Give him a break. There's absolutely no problem with that. If you see some signs, take him off, take him on a bunch of A tours, make sure he plays spin better. If short pitch bowling is a problem, get him to spend some time in South Africa or Australia on A tours again, or playing club cricket or whatever he has to do to get himself there. So it'd be very interesting, but he's clearly a talented player. I don't think anyone's got any doubts on that. Berber Spin Cricket question number 7 on Twitter says, why don't teams use pinch hitters that much anymore? I think what we're seeing with pinch hitters is in the past, when a pinch hitter came out, I don't think teams had thought about them very much. Now I can't speak for every team, but I as an analyst will come up with probably the top 9 or 10 players I will have a plan for. And the reason is that you certainly need to have, you don't know in T20 cricket who's going to come out and who's not going to come out. And so I think that teams are probably better off at playing against pinch hitters. And I think the other problem with pinch hitters that people forget is that it is a risk in that a bad pinch hitter takes up a lot of balls. You can easily get 5 from 10. And these guys are swinging, and they just can't make any contact. The 2 best pinch hitter innings really are 20 off 8 and a golden duck. You haven't lost anything if it's a golden duck, and if it's 20 off 8, that's exactly what you wanted. All right. And I think that too often you get things like 16 off 14 and 5 off 10 and, none off 5. And that's just using up your resources. I do think, though, pinch hitters are underused in a very specialist role in that, let's say you've got a big beefy right-hander in your team, and the only thing he can smash is off spin, but he absolutely gives it a welly. And the first ball of the over, you lose a wicket to an off spinner. It makes sense for that player to go in and just for the rest of the over, absolutely swing off his head. But I do think there is more of a risk in pinch hitting than people understand. There is a reason why these guys are not up the order. They are limited hitters. They don't read the game perfectly. There's also there's a psychological impact. I'd love to do this one day. I might do a long video on it, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot. If you put Adil Rashid at 6 in a cricket team, Adil Rashid bats like a batter. If you put him at 10, he bats like a number 10. Moeen Ali was another very good example of this. And you see it with pinch hitters sometimes. You saw it with Washington Sundar. I think it might have been when he opened. Maybe they did tell him to open properly, but I would have thought that was a pinch opening role, a sort of go out there, see if you can get a couple away. And if you face 10 balls, we'd like you to be at least 15 and see how you go. But he went out there and batted like an opening batter, didn't he? And I think that in that particular case, you see how it doesn't work and how the psychology of those positions really does affect people. And I've been in situations where players have been told that just go out there and smash. You're going out there they've got 2 spinners. We want you to smash the 2 spinners. And then they go out there and they start trying to bat like a batter. And everyone on the bench is just like, we've got batters. We sent you out there to hit. So I do think that is a big part of it. But yeah, Ian Allen says, surprised you went for Pandya. Well, Pandya is, I think he's talking about me picking the overseas, picking the best players in the IPL. Pandya is probably, along with Ravi Jadeja, the only frontline proper all-rounder in that you can get 4 overs from him and you can bat him. I also think his batting is probably underused by Mumbai. He could certainly stretch the lineup a little bit. I know his bowling isn't great, but I think those all-round talents. There's a lot of really solid batters in Indian cricket, and there's quite a few decent bowlers as well. There aren't that many all-rounders. So Ian, that's why I went for Pandya on that particular one. Someone has said KS Ahmed is a good option. I'm not sure what question that is about, but if that he was the player, he was one of the players I was talking about as a pinch hitter who went up the order and didn't hit the ball for us at St. Lucia. So there you go. Sri Krishna K says, why do most bowlers who pick up wickets go for so much runs? I don't think they do they? I'd have to have a better look at that. But I think on a very basic level, a lot of the bowlers who are more weaker links generally go for a lot more runs because people are attacking them more. So I think those are the ones that you're probably thinking about. If you're trying to score 15 runs off an over off someone. So Marcus Stoinis is a very good example of this. If you look at his record, his average is actually quite good, but his economy rate is sky high. And that is because people see Marcus Stoinis come on and they're like, hey, and they try and score 15, 20, 25 runs off him. And they do quite often score those runs off him, but along the way, they lose wickets. So I think there's a big part of that comes out. But I think as a general rule, the very best bowlers manage to take wickets without going for bad economies. And then there are very, very special bowlers like Sunil Narayan, Bhuvi Kumar. God, there's another couple that I'm forgetting. Ruman Reyes might have been another one where they get so good at wicket taking, teams just stop taking any chances against them and just start knocking them around for ones, which means they stop taking wickets but end up with good economies. And then I think there's a lot of guys out there, and this is certainly the case with finger spinners, where finger spin just doesn't get a lot of wickets in white ball cricket anymore at all, especially since the chucking rules were toughened or actually governed by the ICC is probably the best way of putting it. And I think that since then, the T20 and one day finger spin have been very hard to get away, but they haven't got as many wickets. So I think there's a few different patterns there within the game that you see. And then there are some players who just don't, there are some players who simply have high wicket taking and high economy because they bowl at the death a lot. And those two things go hand in hand at the death. So I think there's quite a few different ways of looking at that. Let me have a look here. Harry Kushel says, why do players like Vijay Shankar and Shivam Dubey retain their place in teams? Because they are all-rounders. And we generally take bigger chances on all-rounders in cricket. We generally play them for longer. They have a bigger impact when they're good. So if an all-rounder does come good, completely transcend your team in a way that a batter and a bowler does not. They give your team a bit of flexibility. And you're always hoping they're going to come good. That's kind of why you hired them. And, as I said before, it's not hard to find good batters in India, bowlers in India, at the moment. But there's still not a lot of top level, all-round talent. I think that's just the truth of almost cricket everywhere, but certainly of cricket in India. So they're going to take chances with those sorts of players. And the one thing I would say is, and I'm trying to think of where I used this. It might actually be in one of the videos coming up, but I've written about it before. I always say that all-rounders basically fit into two categories. You either end up as Ian Botham or you end up as Derek Pringle. And the actual talent level between Derek Pringle and Ian Botham is probably not as much as you would think. But what happens is, if you are not fully functioning as an all-rounder, you are a drain on sort of both ends of the game. And if you are fully functioning as an all-rounder, you're a plus on both ends of the game. So you're either a legend or a laughing stock. And I think that is a very unfair way of looking at it. But I think that's how all-rounders end up. And so, Mitch Marsh was one of recent times. Oh my God, there's so many, aren't there? That sort of end up in this sort of middle ground role where they just haven't been able to develop. But the teams know that if they do, if Mitchell Marsh could do what Australia want him to do, which is average 40, batting number 6, and come in and occasionally hit the pitch hard, and sometimes he's going to get a few wickets and maybe average 35 to 40 with the ball. That's a really, really important cricketer to have. That's a better record than Ben Stokes has in his entire career, right? I think. Actually, I don't know what his bowling average is at the moment, Ben. Sorry, Ben, if I've insulted you. But that's a really good player to be able to have in your team, because it means that you can rest your frontline seamers. And you have a batter who's batting at 6, who's maybe averaging slightly less than you could get a specialist batter to do, but probably bats with a certain freedom because he's also in the team for his bowling. And I think all-rounders, provide that sort of magical 5 5-7 lineup, if you will, which is what you want. You want 7 frontline batters and you want 5 frontline bowlers, and that's why teams generally do that as a rule. Let's head back to Twitter, see if there's anything here. Question 11 on Twitter from Inca Red. He's saying he'd like to see a franchise go for a squad full of young, talented, uncapped players from around the world and groom them to fulfill particular roles. Yeah, I don't know about from around the world. This whole thing of just having young players, I think when I was a fan, I was probably someone who always thought about that as well. It's just like, just get as many young kids in. I think you have to realize that the older players are very important as well, because they're there for role models. They're there for sort of to help people through certain situations. So I don't think you want just a team of older players. But I think that for me, what I was trying to do at St. Lucia before I lost my job there was what I wanted to. We already had Kieran Pollard, so obviously we would have wanted to keep him. But around him, I wanted to put a bunch of players between the age of 22 and 25 or 26, whatever Rakeem Cornwall was that year, together, so that they could all grow up and become the next sort of generation of players together, and then use overseas players more as role players. And maybe there weren't that many great leg spinners in the West Indies at the time, so you might get you bring in your one West Indian overseas leg spinner, and then you fill the holes in that you can't do for the rest of the local squad, and build them up over 2 or 3 years, and make it like a development thing, so that in 3 years' time you have probably 3 of the most talented, younger players in the competition, and a bunch of other now experienced guys who are used to doing their role. I think that is a very good way of putting T20 cricket together. I think the problem is that very few teams look long-term. Trying to think of, did Delhi do it a couple of years ago in the IPL? I'm trying to think if there are many other teams who have really thought long-term about how they're going to do it and then stuck with it. And I think part of the reason is, if you think about it, from American sports is made up for that, because you will get a guaranteed good draft pick, even if if you're at the bottom, so you can keep adding to those younger players. That's not quite the case in the way that this works. So I can see why teams don't necessarily do it. It probably follows more the Premier League football way of doing things, where you want your younger players coming through, but you have to be consistently competitive as well. But it's a really good question. Let's see if we've got anything else coming through. Arsalan Ahmed says, Baba Azam, Kane Williamson, and Dawid Malan eventually going to be Joe rooted out of their T20 international squad. I don't think. I mean, Joe Root's played so little T20 cricket that it's hard to even tell what kind of a T20 player is at the moment. I mean, he played one of the most incredible innings in the 2016 World Cup, and what's he played, about 15, 20 games since then. And in some ways, I think they were just trying to take the burden and the stress off it. I mean, I think as much as possible, I think international teams are trying not to use their players in all 3 formats. It's just that in some situations you have to. Baba Azam, I would have to have a look at the stats and the players coming through there. Kane Williamson, the same. But I don't think there's going to be a massive movement against those sorts of players right now. It might be something that we see in the next 5 years, but I don't think those players are going to be penalised. Dawid Malan is different than the other guys in that Dawid Malan's numbers, the only level of cricket that Dawid Malan looks like he's a star is international cricket. Everywhere else, his numbers show that he's a much more regular player. And if you think about the fact he's only played 20 or 25 games, I think that England are more thinking that it's not just that he doesn't quite fit their game plan, which you might be right. But I think it's more to do with the fact that they're not quite sure he is as good as his numbers are, and they don't want to find that out in a World Cup. And I think that is the problem there. It's quite a few innings now we've seen him come in Asia and really struggle to get the ball away for a while. Although he was, and the Kings batting him at number 4 is so stupid. But that's almost another way of looking at it. But yeah. I think in that sort of situation, you've got to you've got to look at what your team needs. And I'd have to have a big deep dive into New Zealand and Pakistan to have a look at their teams. But as a general rule, I think those sorts of players in the next 5 years will find it harder as more guys come out and play like Nicholas Pooran. More guys come out and play, a more aggressive brand, especially in that middle period. Where do you put those sorts of anchor roles going ahead? And also, I think those sorts of players will eventually start to play that role more themselves as well. If Kane Williamson suddenly finds himself out of a job, I don't think he will continue to play. Well, maybe Kane Williamson. Babar Azam finds himself out of a bunch of jobs. I think he has the ability to change his game and to play in a different way. And I really think a lot of players do. It's just that we're not forcing them to do that because we're still rewarding them for playing this sort of more old-fashioned form of T20 cricket at the moment. So, I think that is absolutely fair. What are your thoughts on AB de Villiers as an opening anchor batsman? Oh, wait, sorry. Someone else has come up. Hey, Jarrod, what, according to you, is the best lineup for Sunrisers? How to fix the middle order? Well, it may not matter. Their best lineup, I've been saying from the start, is only playing two of Williamson, Bairstow, and Warner, and using Holder and Nabi in the middle. The problem is that just makes their top order weaker as well. There is no best lineup. Their team fundamentally does not work. This is when people say, "Oh, you got to drop Morgan," and we've got to move Tripathi, and Pooran's got to be dropped. It's like you're not losing these games because of these things. These are just normal things that happen in T20 cricket. You're losing the games because fundamentally the lineup is not adequately put together, and that is what happens again and again and again. That's why you have a look on the channel. I worry a lot less about individual sort of things that happen. And I worry a lot more about, bigger trends. And I think that in that particular case, the Sunrisers just couldn't or didn't go out and fix the problems that they had. I think fundamentally, they had Mohammad Nabi and they had Rashid Khan, and they went out and got Majib. Now, they obviously thought they needed another overseas spinner, but you can't play all three of them at once. That money would have been better spent on a very good local batter. But were there that many good local batters out there? I don't know. But I think looking back on it, they've clearly made an error there. And that's their bigger problem. Their best is not good enough, I suppose, is the biggest problem there. We'll just go over. I won't ask that because that's exactly the same question. What have we got here? Oh, all the Virat Kohli stands have turned up, or anti-stands even. Let's have a look. Sorry, just looking for something specific here. Shri has asked me, do you think that Virat Kohli is a good T20 batter? Look, I mean, to be able to answer that correctly, you would have to go through a lot. He's certainly not someone that you would drop from your team. He is clearly one of the world's best batters and fundamentally is a quality player in white ball cricket. What he is not doing is playing the game 100% on playing the game 100% the way that it probably needs to be played into the future. I think there's a real push towards Australian and Indian players playing this really conservative brand of T20 cricket, whether it be 4 single or 6 single, whether it be everyone trying to be the sort of sensible opener or the quality number 4 or the anchor, whatever you want to say. I don't know why, but India and Australia are really, really into that. And if you look at 2 other teams, England and the West Indies, they're looking at it completely different ways. Now, long term, there's no reason why Australia and India, because of their talent, can't still win games, right? But long term, the England and West Indies way is clearly where T20 cricket is going to go. It's not going to go back towards anchors, is it? We're going to have less anchors, and our anchors are going to be more like Chris Gale, and much less like some of the sort of or the way that Virat Kohli currently anchors. And I just think if you have a player of Virat Kohli's talent, why do you want him to be batting like at a replacement level for so long? And that's my biggest thing with him is he has the ability to win games in so many different facets. So do I think he's a good T20 player? Yes. Do I think he could be much better and be used much better? Undoubtedly. I really think he is, you don't get there. He's one of the best players in the world. Like, it's ridiculous, but that happens a lot. I think that happens more than we understand in T20 and one-day cricket. Is players play certain roles, and then it gets in their head, and sometimes they think that's the only way. And a lot of the players around the world that are playing within themselves, there's a natural conservative nature to batting that we don't have a look at. Something I really want to have a look at with KL Rahul, and I might do it, but if when the league comes back, whenever that is there's a very similar pattern with another famous player who was at one stage basically got known for making runs everywhere at a very fast rate, got to be one of the world's best players, and then pulled back. And KL Rahul has done a really similar thing. Now, how much has he done that? Because that is what the Indian mindset of one-day batters. I mean, the amount of times people will say to me, "Oh, he bats too slow in one-day cricket, KL Rahul." It's like, they all bat too slow. We know they can all bat quicker. It's ridiculous how slow they bat, but that is their team plan, right? And to be fair to them, they've won a lot of one-day games doing that. And I think that mindset is kind of seeped into all of these guys. I mean, you're seeing it with Rishabh Pant at the moment. Everyone's trying to pull him back. Why? If he can average 30 at a strike rate of 150, that is so much better than averaging 40 at a strike rate of 125. Why would you want to pull him back? So I think for me, that's what I'm kind of looking at these sorts of things. So I still think Virat Kohli is a fantastic player. I think we've got a question on AB de Villiers that someone had. Gijo says, thoughts on AB de Villiers as an opening batter? I think someone else asked about him as being an anchor as well. I think there's probably a reason he doesn't want to do it, my guess is he doesn't feel as confident against the new ball. While most players want to do it, not everyone does. A lot of the West Indian guys just don't like it at all. That's why, Kieran Pollard could open the batting. He'll get a few more bounces, but he's also, imagine what he could do with the fielders up, and Andre Russell as well. So, and a lot of players just don't feel as confident with it. I think that is very, very fair. I think in AB's case, you would have to talk to him about what he thinks and how that is going to work specifically for him. I would say there is a reason why he hasn't done it. And so if he could do it, he would be doing it already, would be my thought process behind that. Glenn Maxwell's probably another one there. But you would have to chat to him. It's one of those things where I know he has done it on occasions, and he's batted 3 as well. But he seems to want to push himself down to 4 and 5 more and more. And there would be a specific reason for that, I would think. Ankit says, is Butler the best delacquerer today? His upside is bigger than Kohli, his closest rival, I think. Yeah, I think. Well, Luke Ronke's probably the best in world cricket at just absolutely attacking the new ball, Ankit, and making it stop swing just by hitting it so hard. Josh Butler's not far away from that. And we don't know if Luke Ronke could do it consistently in the IPL because he's played 5 games and he's a much better player now than when he ever played in the IPL, although he's obviously getting on a bit of the last couple of years. But yeah, I think he is, a very, very interesting one. There's a couple of really good, shorter form openers that I like. I haven't had a look at Anton Devcic's record, but there was a couple of years where Anton Devcic from New Zealand was absolutely brilliant at just going out and smoking the ball for a little while. And that's what we're talking about, aren't we? Someone who can change the game. But yeah, in the IPL, for sure, Butler seems like the best guy. If you saw in the big dip, you saw that he had the best power play strike rate. And I think by a distance, didn't he? I think no one else was massively over about 135, 140 of the guys who were regularly opening up there. So I think that's a very good call. Look, he's a fantastic cricketer, isn't he? Josh Butler. With that hot take, I will move on to my last question. Let's have a look here. All right, last question from Huge Reaction. Huge Erection. Sorry, I didn't even get your very funny penis joke there. How do you rate these youngsters? Tom Banton, Patakal, Josh Felipe. Oh, and Finn Allen. Do you know what? I haven't seen enough of Finn Allen. Patakal, I really, really like. I love the way he bats. Tom Banton I need to see more of Tom Banton in in high leagues, I think, to get a really good feel from him. I love the way he hits the ball, though. I really do. He's certainly got a very good future. Yeah, I mean, I want Josh to bat at number 7 for Australia or number 6 for Australia now. I think I'd have him in my T20 team instantly. I think he suits that role so much better than Alex Carey. Absolutely phenomenal cricketer. My worry for him is that he's having to bat up the order, but I think, I think that when you bring up all these 4 guys, right, I kind of think of where they're going to fit into the IPL. And I think that Josh has a natural role. Patakal is obviously fine. Tom Banton, there's a bit of Liam Livingstone about him. And I wonder where he makes his mark with an IPL team. Maybe in the next year or two, that will just be obvious. And Finn Allen's in a very, very, very interesting one. And then I wonder where they will fit into their international teams. Does Patakal come in and open, with Rohit or with Virat? Really interesting. The way he's playing at the moment is and we need to see him, do it throughout a whole season, because obviously last season he played it almost in a completely different way. But he's very interesting. I really wanted Josh to play in this IPL because I wanted him to bat 5 or 6 and really show and really go back to that role, because when he did it early on in his career, he was brilliant at it, and would love to see that. As I said with Banton, he's probably going to bat top 4, but where's he going to fit in with England? If he comes in with England, it's a really, really interesting one. And Finn Allen, I just need to see more of Finn Allen as a general rule. But there we go. Thank you all very much. Stay safe. Stay at home. Don't touch people on the face with your hands and all those sorts of things. There will be more content. We obviously won't be doing it on a daily basis, but there's absolutely tons that we already have ready to go. And as you'll probably be aware, when it comes to me, it's a lack of ideas is never a big problem. There will be, I think I'm supposed to be doing, actually, I don't know what I'm going to be doing for ESPNcricinfo, because they don't know probably how they're going to cover the IPL. But if you want to see more of my writing, go to wickets.substack.com. Or is it wicket.substack.com? I should know that, shouldn't I? Obviously, there's the podcast and everything as well. But we'll be back very soon with some more videos. But thank you for coming on for the live. The lives were more a thing for the IPL, but we will we'll have a look if we were going to use the live, if we'll be able to do them weekly. But I'm going to have a lot of free time on my hands. So, hey, I might be able to bring them in. But thank you, everyone, for coming on. Thanks for so many for the comments. Sorry, I tried to get to as many of the comments as I could, and also tried to get to as many as the Twitter ones from yesterday. But thank you. If you haven't already subscribe. If you can steal, a computer or your login from your parents, subscribe on their account. That was a joke. But thank you very much. Remember, the more that you share these videos, the more help that we get. But the channel's going really well, and the more that we can sort of make from the channel, obviously, the more the more money and the more views that we have, the more videos that we can make. We've got some really, really cool things coming up. So thank you very much, and I will see you for the next live, whenever that is.